Some schools close their doors forever, but what's left behind doesn't always stay empty. Abandoned schools have a strange way of holding onto the past. Empty classrooms, broken lockers, and long, silent hallways become breeding grounds for stories most people would rather forget. These are a few allegedly true encounters from people who dared to step inside and never saw those schools the same way again. Let's begin. The bell rang even though the school had been closed for 20 years, and what followed was the sound of a classroom full of students standing up at once. I've been into urban exploration for years, old hospitals, factories, churches, you name it. But there's something uniquely eerie about schools. Maybe it's because they're supposed to be safe, lively places. Empty classrooms and silent gyms just feel wrong. Last winter, I heard about an abandoned high school on the edge of town. It had been closed down in the late 90s after budget cuts, and people said the building was practically untouched since the last day of class. Desks, chalkboards, even textbooks were supposedly still there. For me, that was irresistible. I went alone one Saturday afternoon. The air was sharp with that dry, dusty cold that seeps into your bones the moment you step inside a building left to rot. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, landing on faded posters curling off the walls. "Reading is fun," one said in cheerful bubble letters above a water-damaged floor. I started in the gym, bleachers collapsing under their own weight, basketball hoops hanging crooked. Then I moved through the halls, taking pictures of whatever caught my eye. Lockers pried open, peeling paint, graffiti from other explorers. Time slipped away as I wandered deeper. I passed classrooms that looked frozen in time. Rows of desks still lined up, chalk equations half erased on the boards. Dust coated everything like a blanket. It was quiet, unnervingly so, except for the crunch of broken glass under my boots. When I checked my phone, I realized it was almost 3 in the afternoon. I decided I'd explore one last classroom before heading out. I found one with the door half open, its windows shattered and its floor littered with papers. I raised my camera to take a shot of the chalkboard. That's when it happened. The bell rang. It was sharp, metallic, echoing through the entire school like it had always done at the end of a period. But the power had been cut decades ago. My hand froze on the camera. I wasn't imagining it. This was loud, clear, and very real. And then, immediately after, came the sound that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Dozens of chairs scraping against the floor. The sound came from all around me. From classrooms up and down the hall, maybe even above me. It was the unmistakable noise of students standing up at once. I stood rooted to the spot, heart hammering in my chest. The building had been silent for hours. Now it sounded like every classroom was full. I told myself it had to be other explorers. Maybe they had set something up, some prank or a speaker system, but deep down I knew that wasn't right. The scraping didn't sound like speakers. It was too real, too physical. And there hadn't been any other cars outside when I arrived. I turned off my flashlight and held my breath. The sound stopped almost instantly, like they knew I was listening. The silence was even worse than the noise. I decided I needed to leave, and fast. I backed into the hallway, every muscle tense. That's when I noticed something else. The classroom doors I had passed earlier, doors that had been open, were now closed. Every single one of them, lining both sides of the hallway, shut tight. I forced myself forward, steps echoing louder than I wanted them to. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump, but when I pulled it out, the screen was black, dead battery. It had been nearly full earlier. When I reached the stairwell, I paused to listen. Faintly, I could hear it, whispering. Dozens of overlapping voices, too low to make out words, rising from the floors below. It reminded me of the sound a cafeteria makes at lunchtime, but softer, like they were trying not to be heard. I forced myself down the stairs, gripping the rusted railing. The whispering grew louder until it stopped all at once, the moment I stepped into the first-floor hallway. That silence again, thick, suffocating. I was only about 50 feet from the exit when the PA system crackled to life. Static filled the hallway, then a voice came through. A man's voice, deep, distorted. "Students, remain in your seats until the final bell." The speaker popped, then went dead. I bolted. My footsteps pounded against the tile as I sprinted for the front doors. I didn't dare look behind me, but I swore I could hear footsteps following, echoing mine perfectly, just a half beat off. I shoved the door open and stumbled into the daylight, gasping for air. The moment I crossed the threshold, the sounds stopped. The air was still, silent, like nothing had happened. When I finally looked back, the school was just a building. Dead, rotting, windows empty like dark eyes. But here's the part that unsettles me the most. I checked the photos later that night. Most were normal, desks, chalkboards, lockers. But the last photo, the one I took right before the bell rang, shows the classroom full of students, dozens of them, sitting at their desks, all facing the camera, and every single one of them is blurred, like they were moving toward me. We thought the hallway would lead us to the exit. Instead, every step forward only took us deeper into the same stretch of lockers. I was 19 the night this happened. My friend Tyler and I had been exploring abandoned places for a while, mostly for photos and cheap adrenaline. That winter, we heard about an old high school on the outskirts of town. It had been closed down years earlier after asbestos issues, and people said it was basically untouched, still full of desks, textbooks, even old trophies in the display cases. We went late, close to midnight, thinking it would be less likely anyone would notice us slipping in. The school loomed out of the snow like a dead giant, windows broken and boarded, paint flaking under the harsh glow of the streetlights. We slipped in through a side door that had been kicked open long ago. The inside smelled like mold and wet wood. My flashlight caught flakes of paint hanging from the ceiling like cobwebs. Every sound seemed amplified. Our boots crunching on broken tile, the hollow creaks of the building shifting in the cold. For the first hour, it was the usual. Classrooms with overturned desks, graffiti everywhere, papers littering the floor. Tyler kept making dumb jokes, trying to downplay how eerie it felt. But then we found that hallway. It looked normal at first. Long, straight lockers lining both sides all the way to a set of double doors at the far end. Tyler said it looked perfect for a photo, so we headed down. The air in there was noticeably colder and the silence heavier, like the building itself was holding its breath. I remember noticing the lockers, faded blue paint, little vents near the top, some with stickers peeling off. Nothing unusual. But when we reached the middle of the hallway, something strange happened. I glanced back, expecting to see the doorway we came through maybe 50 feet behind us, only it wasn't there. It looked like the hall stretched just as far behind us as it did in front, with the same double doors at the end. I stopped walking. Tyler? He turned, frowned, then pulled out his phone light to double-check. His face paled. That wasn't like that before. We kept moving, thinking maybe we'd just gotten turned around. But the farther we walked, the stranger it got. The hallway just kept going. Every 20 feet, the same set of lockers repeated. The same dent in the third locker. The same peeling sticker of a smiley face. The same rust stain trailing down to the floor. Tyler tested it. He scraped his key against one of the locker doors, leaving a fresh silver mark in the paint. Then we walked another 30 or 40 feet. On the lockers ahead of us, the exact same scratch already existed. By then, the air felt thick, like trying to breathe underwater. My stomach churned with that primal animal dread you can't reason your way out of. "We just need to head back," I told him. But when we turned around, the way behind us looked identical. Same lockers, same doors, same scratch. We tried the double doors on either end, both were locked. When Tyler shoved one hard enough to rattle it in its frame, a metallic echo rang down the hallway, bouncing back and forth until it sounded like it came from every direction at once. That was when we heard it. Footsteps, not ours, slow, deliberate, echoing down the hall. The sound carried, but no matter where we looked, we couldn't see anyone. Just the empty corridor stretching forever. Tyler whispered, "Maybe it's another explorer." But his voice shook, and I knew he didn't believe that. We started walking faster. The footsteps matched our pace, always just a few beats behind. When we stopped, they stopped. When we ran, they ran. But every time we turned around, there was nothing. At some point, Tyler yanked open one of the lockers out of pure desperation. Inside was a tattered backpack. He pulled it out and froze. It wasn't dusty, it wasn't decayed. It looked new. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside were notebooks, binders, even a pencil case. And on the first page of one of the notebooks was handwriting. His handwriting. It was his name and his schedule, his doodles. As if it belonged to him, but he'd never been to this school. He dropped it like it burned him. "We need to get out now." We broke into a sprint, no longer caring about staying quiet. The hallway blurred around us, lockers repeating endlessly, footsteps chasing close behind. My lungs felt like they were on fire, but I didn't dare stop. At some point, my flashlight flickered, and for a split second I swore I saw figures in the peripheral glow, rows of students standing between the lockers, all facing forward, motionless. When the light steadied, they were gone. Finally, without warning, we burst through a doorway. 1 second we were trapped in that endless hall, and the next we stumbled into the school's main lobby, collapsing onto the floor. Behind us, the door slammed shut on its own. We didn't stick around. We bolted out into the freezing night, gasping for air. To this day, I don't know what happened. Tyler refuses to talk about it. He won't even look at the photos he took. But here's the part that keeps me awake at night. Sometimes when I'm in a quiet hallway at work or in the subway, I'll hear it again. That echo, those footsteps, always just a few steps behind me. The intercom crackled to life in a school that hadn't held a class in 20 years, and the voice that spoke already knew my name. When I was 17, my friends and I were obsessed with sneaking into abandoned places, old warehouses, burned-out houses, even a forgotten water treatment plant. But there was one spot in town everyone whispered about, the old middle school. It had been shut down in the late 90s after a new building was built, and since then it had just sat there, rotting behind a chain-link fence. I'd ridden past it countless times on my bike growing up, staring at the boarded-up windows and the tall, empty flagpole out front. Something about it always gave me a chill. One night, I decided to go inside by myself. Not for fun, exactly. I had this stupid idea that if I got some good photos of the inside, maybe I could finally prove to my friends that I wasn't the scared one. Getting in wasn't hard. The back door near the gym had been pried open long ago. The moment I stepped inside, the air hit me, thick, stale, smelling of mildew and rust. My flashlight beam revealed long hallways lined with lockers, their paint flaking, graffiti scrawled across the doors. I walked slowly, the silence so heavy that every creak of the floorboards seemed magnified. Posters still clung to the walls in some spots, character counts and perfect attendance. Their colors faded, their corners curled. I wandered past the cafeteria, the gym, and finally stopped when I saw a wooden door with frosted glass. Principal's office. The glass was cracked, but the letters were still readable. Something about it drew me in. I pushed open the door, and the hinges screamed in protest. Inside, the room was like a time capsule. A heavy desk sat in the middle, covered in a thick layer of dust. Papers were scattered across it, some yellowed and curling. Behind the desk was a tall filing cabinet, its drawers slightly ajar, and on the far wall a corkboard still held faded notices pinned with rusting tacks. I raised my phone to take a picture, my hands shaking a little from nerves. That's when I noticed the intercom speaker in the corner of the ceiling, a big square box, the kind every classroom used to have. It looked dead, just another relic of the past. Then, without warning, it hissed to life. A burst of static filled the room, loud enough to make me flinch. I froze, staring at the speaker as if it might explain itself. And then a voice came through, a low, steady male voice. "Student, marked absent." The words echoed in the office, distorted but unmistakable. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The school hadn't had power in decades. There was no electricity. No one should have been able to use that system. I backed toward the door, my flashlight trembling in my hand. My mind raced. Maybe it was a prank, some kind of recording left behind. But how would it turn on right when I was standing in that office? The intercom popped again, louder this time. "Student, marked, absent." The voice dragged out the last word, like it was savoring it. I stumbled into the hallway, my boots crunching on broken tile. The hall stretched ahead into darkness, lockers yawning open like mouths. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Classroom doors, one after another, were slowly creaking open. Just a few inches, but enough to hear the hinges moan. The sound carried down the hallway like a wave. I turned to leave, but the intercom above me crackled again. This time, multiple voices joined in. Dozens, layered and overlapping, all repeating the same phrase. Marked absent, marked absent, marked absent. Their tones varied, some calm, some harsh, some whispering, but all in unison, pounding the words into my skull. Panic surged, and I ran. My flashlight beam jerked wildly over the walls, catching glimpses of movement, shapes in the doorways, shadows sliding back just out of sight. When I reached the stairwell, I heard footsteps above me, dozens of them, like a stampede of students rushing between classes. Only there hadn't been anyone here for 20 years. The voices followed me, blaring from the intercoms in every hallway I passed. They grew louder, closer, until I couldn't tell if they were coming from the speakers or from inside my own head. I sprinted for the exit, lungs burning, my boots slamming against the floor. The front doors came into view, their glass long since shattered. I didn't slow down. I burst outside into the cold night air, stumbling onto the cracked pavement of the parking lot. The voices cut off instantly. The silence was so sudden it rang in my ears. I kept running until the school was nothing but a dark silhouette behind me. When I finally stopped, gasping for breath, I checked my phone. The screen was black. When I tried to turn it on, it flickered once and died, even though the battery had been full when I arrived. Later that night, I charged it and scrolled through my photos. Most were blurry from how badly my hands had been shaking, but one made my stomach drop. It was the photo I'd taken in the principal's office, just before the intercom came on. Only, in the picture, the chair behind the desk wasn't empty. Someone was sitting there, a man in a suit. His head was tilted toward the camera, and even though the photo was grainy and dark, I could tell he was smiling. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to let me know in the comments and share your own experiences if you've ever explored a place like this. Thank you for watching. And remember, the scariest stories are the ones that really happened.